welcome to the Intuitive Insights podcast series. I'm Nina Lockwood, founder and director of Intuitive Interim and Executive Search. Throughout this series, I will be sharing engaging conversations with talented leaders from across the UK transport sector. Today, I'm over the moon to welcome Vicky Snell, Customer Relations Manager for TransPennine Express. Vicky will share her career story, but also give us some indication and some context of why she was awarded the British Empire Medal for services to mental health earlier in 2022. It was my absolute pleasure to welcome Vicky to the podcast today. I hope you enjoy it. Vicky Snell, it's an absolute delight to welcome you to the Intuitive Insights podcast. Hello.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. You know that when we held the Women in Rail event, the Mental Wealth Cafe back in 2019, I think,
Yeah.
or was it early
Before
2020?
it was
It was pre the
2019.
thing.
It was the before times.
It was the before times.
Yeah.
It was. And whilst I had met you several times at that stage, I think seeing you and actually hearing you tell your story was a complete inspiration for me, and also not a dry eye in the house. So I'm going to try and keep it together today, but there's no promises. So in terms of those people who are tuning in to today's episode, I'm going to introduce you with your full title. So Vicky Snell, you are a Customer Relations Manager at TransPennine Express in the glorious city of Manchester.
Yes.
So that's the day job. I'm really interested to know about your career story, Vicky. We're going to do in true traditional Intuitive Insights podcast fashion. I want you to go back to the beginning, take us right back to the beginning of your story, and talk me through your career, where you've been, what you've done, and actually what a day in the life or a week in the life of a customer relations manager is, because I'm sure that's pretty interesting, which might be an overused word that we're using at the moment, but life is quite interesting. So I'm going to hand over to you, Vicky, and I know there's the work stuff, there's the career stuff, but there's also been some pretty significant events in your life as well. So tell us who you are, where you've been, what you've been doing.
So I'm definitely one of those people who kind of fell into the railway. I think it's kind of I think everyone I've ever met who's worked in the railway has either always wanted to do it, it's been their childhood dream, or kind of accidentally happened to them. And I definitely fall into the latter category. So I started working in our call centre back when it was based in Plymouth on what was supposed to be an 8-week temporary contract. And January will make that 10 years ago. So
wow,
it's been a long time now. I was crazy when I think about it. That's been almost a decade. But yeah, I was 21 years old when I started doing this, and it was post uni. So I'd just graduated, and my original plan post university was always to do something exciting. Like I'd spent one of my years in uni living abroad. I lived in America for a year, and I'd really thrived there, and I really enjoyed that. So my plan always was to go and do something. I was even talking about going to work on a cruise ship, like doing something, because I wanted to see more of the world and everything like that. And sadly, during my last year of uni, I broke my leg for the first time ever, which was kind of where all the stuff in my personal life started kind of unraveling. Seemed like a strong word, but it did feel like, I was just 20 when that happened, when my leg broke for the first time. And by the time I graduated uni, it became clear to me that what was going on with my leg wasn't going to be a quick fix. It wasn't going to be, what most people's stories are when they break their leg, which is you're in a cast for a few weeks and then you have some physiotherapy potentially, and then you kind of move on, and maybe your leg aches a little like in the winter or something. If you've got metal in there. But by the time I graduated university and was looking for work, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to do what I wanted to do. So I was never going to be in a position where I could work on a cruise ship or stand up for long periods of time and everything like that. So I started looking for an office job. And Plymouth is where I'm from. That's where I've lived most of my life until I moved up to Manchester. And literally the call center there was kind of like, at the time, everyone worked there at some point. Like, it was like a thing. It was like a rite of passage to be from Plymouth, was to work in this call center at some point. And yeah, I was meant to be there for 8 weeks as a delay repay agent. So it's literally doing data input to make sure customers got their money back for First Capital Connect, which no longer exists, but that's who they were at the time.
Right. Wow.
And that's where I started out. And then all of First Group's stuff was down there at the time. So it was Great Western, TransPennine Express, and what was First Capital Connect, or was being handled from this call center. And as time went on, I kind of started being put onto other contracts. I ended up working for TPE. And I'll always remember the reason I started working on TransPennine Express's contract was because of the Farnworth Tunnel being closed. Whilst they were doing work on it. And I don't know why that always sticks in my mind, but that, for some reason, is something I always remember. And never really looked back. Like, the job opportunity came up in Manchester to work for TransPennine directly when the call centre was closing. So it closed in 2016 because it was moved up north. And I just thought, why not? Why not give it a go? I was already kind of doing the job anyway. So that first job I had at TPE was helping with like escalated complaints and specialist stuff, and helping with anything that our directors get emailed, like helping kind of investigate those responses and everything like that. And I was already doing that really down in Plymouth. So I was like, why don't I just take the chance, just do it? I don't have any dependents, wasn't in a relationship or anything. So I was like, if I make this decision, I'm the only person it impacts. And I think at the time, I'm sure my family missed me, but it was at the time, I was like, when are you ever gonna get the chance to do something just for you? Like, that's really rare in life, I think. And I was like, I really want to do this for me. And at the time that I had one of those external fixators on my leg, because we were still in the trying to save my leg stage of the process. So it was a hell of a thing to move with, because I was still, fully on crutches and everything like that. And I remember my mum was talking to me quite a lot about it at the time. And obviously, part of that's she's your mum, so she wants you to be close by, and there's that element to it as well. But also, I was, at the time, I had less mobility then than I do now. So it was a difficulty to kind of, that definitely formed part of the decision. But also, I didn't want it to stop me from doing anything. And I guess my thought process with it was, well, worst case scenario, I can just move home. Like, that's always been, and at least I'll have tried. At least I'll have tried it, And I think that's what's interesting with my career, is the story of my leg has kind of, for lack of a better word, framed it. Like, it's been kind of like a big part of it. So the reason I ended up working in the railway at all was because my leg broke and they couldn't fix it. And then it's kind of always had these moments throughout my career here. So, I lived up here, but was traveling down to Plymouth for my hospital appointments, because I was in such a critical part of my journey with my leg at that point that I didn't want to switch hospitals. And I really trusted my surgeon. And I think when you go through something like I did, with what ended up being like 6 and a bit years of trying to save my leg before I ended up making the decision that I did to have it amputated, I really needed that trust. So I was going down for those appointments and stuff. And it's interesting to me that the two have always been very intertwined. Like my career, and then also my health issues that ended up, ultimately meaning that I did lose my leg 5 years ago in December, which is crazy.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, that's gone really fast. It's really, really weird. But yeah, to me, it's very interesting that they're very intertwined. Like, it's very much something that are the same thing to me, almost. Like, work. I would not be here working now in Manchester at this job in TransPennine Express if my leg hadn't broken on that day in August 2011. And it's crazy to think about those connections and how life kind of just happens to us sometimes.
Absolutely.
All we can do is our best.
Yeah. There's that, do you remember that film? I know it is quite a few years ago now, so I might be just showing my age, but there was a film with Gwyneth Paltrow called Sliding Doors.
Yes, yes, I have
Oh
seen that.
my
Yeah,
gosh. Yeah. And you can overlay that on
yeah.
your own life, can't you? Because it's like, well, yeah, if
Yeah,
that had happened, then I
yeah,
might have gone
yeah,
off a different route. But actually, this is what's happened. And
yeah.
not only is this what's happened, but this is how you have responded to it.
Yeah, and I think that's something I've always found really interesting. And I think, you know me, I've always been very open with my struggles with my mental health,
Mm,
and physical health and mental health are so linked, and
yeah,
it's something I've always been really open with. And I think when I'm having a tough time with it and struggling with mental health, one thing I've consistently kind of gone through is this kind of grief for this version of me that never got to exist.
yeah,
This version, because like my 20s were very much taken over by the situation of my leg. And I think that occasionally, and I do still feel that sometimes now, I'm 31 now, but I still sometimes feel that, like, who would I have been without this? But also, and I think it's okay to grieve that person who never existed, because that's a version of your life that you never got to live. But I also am now probably the most comfortable I am, or I have been, with who I am now. So, like, I've been going through therapy and everything like that, but
mm,
it's yeah, I think that's something I've definitely experienced. And it's interesting because life, we like to think we can control it, but we really can't. And it's just like I do always joke, oh, my career kind of just happened to me, but it kind of did just happen to me. Like, this was never what when I was a little girl, I didn't dream about being the customer relations manager for a train company.
right.
But funnily enough, wasn't on my
No,
wasn't on my life plans when I was a little girl. But I like where I've ended up. I know I'm very good at what I do. Like, and
yeah,
and as someone with anxiety, that's really kind of, it's taken me a long time to get to the point where I know I can say that I know I'm good at what I do.
yeah, yeah,
And that's it's interesting that everything's so connected. And I think it might always seem like I'm being glib when I say my career just happened to me, but it very much did.
yeah.
And I've kind of just taken the bull by the horns and done my best with it, really.
Yeah, I think that there are definitely the people who have a plan,
Hmm.
and by this age I'm going to be this, and certainly
Hmm.
going back into my first career, if you like, when I worked in retail banking, there was a grading structure. And
Hmm.
at that point, you'd be grade whatever you were. I can't even remember what they were now, whether they raised, I think they were 1 to 5. And then after that, it was a managerial grade. So you went into
Yeah.
letters after that from memory. But you weren't necessarily in that grade until you were good enough to move to the next one. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, I've been here for 2 years now. So I now I'm going to be the next grade up, etc.
Yeah.
So I think back in the day, some organisations or some industries maybe had a system which meant that your career plan was done for you, because you join at a
Yeah.
junior level and then every so many years you'll move up into the next grade. There are
Hmm.
definitely some people who have a plan and say, right, when
Hmm.
I'm going to go to uni and I'm going to do this, and when I come out, I'm going to do that, and then I'll do this. And honestly, Vicky, and the number of people I've spoken to over all of the years of my career, not just
Yeah.
whilst I've been doing executive search and recruitment, those people are in the minority.
Yeah.
I think you and people like you and me who go into something because there's an opportunity there. And obviously,
Yeah.
at the beginning, you've realised that you need to have an office job because you can't be on
Yeah.
your feet. So you can't
Yeah.
you can't work in retail, for example, because you cannot
Yeah.
be able to stand on a shop floor for 7, 8 hours a day. So you make a choice and you go for it. So,
Hmm.
and I feel like I want to draw attention to the fact that you made a choice and you went
Yeah.
for it, because actually there are another cohort of people who will say, well, I actually know that's what I wanted, to work on a cruise ship, and I can't do that now, so I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to wait
Hmm.
for something else to happen. And then when it
Yeah.
doesn't, I'm going to get a bit grumpy about the fact that I lost my childhood dream to go and work on a cruise ship because of
Yeah.
this situation that I was placed in. I think that you are one of the best examples I've ever met of someone who was given a bag of lemons and went off and made some fabulous lemonade with it, because
Yeah.
you've made such a difference by sharing your own experience with other people. And we know what a difference you've made because you were actually awarded for it in the Queen's Honours, weren't
Yes.
you?
Yes. Yeah.
So
British
we'll come
Empire
to
medal.
that. Yeah. So we'll come to that in the story. But in terms
Yeah.
of kind of getting to the role you're in now, so you've come up to Manchester, you've moved up to
Yeah.
Manchester, albeit you need to keep going back down to Plymouth in terms of
Mm-hmm.
seeing the medical support people about your leg.
Mm-hmm.
At what point did you realise that actually it's not getting any better? We're not going to be able to do anything, and it's becoming presumably prohibitive to you leading the life you want to lead.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd been living up here for, I think, just over about 18 months by the time I had my leg amputated. So there was about that kind of time gap between me moving here and then me having the surgery. But the actual decision was made in June of 2017. And I'll always remember that because the last surgery I had to save my leg
Yeah.
was on my mum's birthday.
Right.
And like, bless her. She still did the dutiful, came to the hospital with me at 7 o'clock in the morning and did the
Right.
mum thing. And
Yeah.
but it was, it was her birthday. And I hadn't said this to anyone, but I very much had like a conversation with myself where I just had this feeling, and to this day I couldn't tell you where it came from, that surgery wasn't going to work.
Right.
And whether it was, me trying to mentally prepare myself because I'd already had by that point, I think 4 failed surgeries on my leg. So
Right.
I think that, and this surgery was essentially replicating the surgery I'd had before that hadn't worked. It was just doing the same thing again.
Right.
And I kind of, yeah, so whether it was self-protection or instinct, I don't really know what to call it.
Yeah.
I knew that surgery wasn't going to work. Like I had this deep, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. Because in my head, I knew the next stage was amputation. Like I knew that would be what I would want to do after this, because by that point it had been 6 years of trying to save my leg. And by that point, all of my 20s, I was 26 at the time. And I remember thinking, I'm going to do this. And I, like, looking back on it, I wonder if I never wanted to be able to look back and think, oh, what if I'd done that last surgery and it had worked? Like for that kind of, that bit in your head. So I prepared myself for that, woke up, and the surgery clearly hadn't worked. My leg was visibly shorter than the other one, because there's been so much damage to it that it was just, there was a real issue with it. And I knew right then that my only options would be amputation or to have another one of those frames put on it that I'd had on previously. And I will say, out of everything I've been through, that was the worst. And I was very much like, I am not doing that again. Just very clear to myself, like, that is not an option to me. So I made that decision in the June, that yeah, this is the way this is going to go. But I didn't say it to anybody, because I was like, this might make me sound like I've lost the plot a little bit if I say this to someone, because it's a big thing to be like, I'm going to tell the doctors I want to have my leg amputated. Like that is, even though I've got all this evidence, all of these years of, it's a huge thing. Like you're permanently removing one of your limbs, apart of one of your limbs. So I didn't say anything to anyone. And I had a follow-up appointment. They have loads of follow-up appointments when you have surgery or any kind of, the head metal work in my leg as well. So I had loads of follow-up appointments. And I was quite famous at Fracture Clinic, by the way. I was like well known. I spent so much time there. Like it's one of the places where I really thrived. Like I would walk up to the desk to like check in, and the guy behind the desk didn't even have to ask my name. Like he knew who I was. It was like I was like a celebrity at Fracture Clinic. It's one of the few places in my life that I really and I remember we were going to Fracture Clinic, and it was me and my mum, and she always came with me to my appointments. Like she and even then I was in my mid to late. But you always want your mum when you're not feeling your best, don't you? So she, I remember I'd been putting off saying it to her because I was like, she's going to try and talk me out of this, even though I've already made the decision for myself. And we were in the car, and I was just like, just so you know, I'm going to mention amputation to him. because I was just like, I knew I had to say it at some point.
Yeah.
And she was obviously very much just like, what?
Yes. Where's that
But I
come
think
from?
also,
Yeah.
like, having spoken to her about it since, I think she knew the writing was on the wall. But I just think, acknowledging something is always the hardest part sometimes, isn't it? So I think, we were both talking about something that we maybe skirted around for quite some time.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to my surgeon, I said to him, like, what are my options here, really? Like, I did, like, we've tried for so long to do this. An orthopedic surgeon never wants to remove a limb. That's like the thing they're trying to remove. They're trying to avoid, really.
Yeah.
And he said to me, I was correct, that my only options were to have the frame again, but it would have to be much higher up my leg. It would have to include my knee, or the amputation, which would be below the knee.
Right.
And I think the deciding factor for me was, well, the frame hadn't worked the first time. Why would it work the second time?
Yeah.
And I said to him, I was like, can you be really honest with me? If I went for the frame, which I wasn't going to do, but I wanted to seem like, I was thinking
explore all the options.
Yeah, explore all the options, and it didn't work. Would you then have to amputate above the knee? And he said yes. And I was like, well, in that case, I think we know the answer, don't we?
Right.
Like, I think we know, because that makes it so much harder. Because you're missing two joints then, your ankle and your knee.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I think that makes the decision, doesn't it? And that was in August, and I had my leg amputated on the 18th of December. So that was quite a period of time in between where you're having this big thing happening.
Yeah.
And me, like, I'm very, forthright. Like, I'll just say stuff. Like, and very often, like, I've never been one to keep my mouth shut particularly. And I would just tell people because I'd normalized it so much in my head. I kind of always forgot how much of a shock it must be to hear someone say,
yes,
oh, and have a date when it was going to happen. Like, I was like, oh yeah, on the 18th of December I'm having my leg amputated. Like, it was such a and I think I'd normalized it so much in my head because it was normal to me. It was my life.
You're very matter of fact about it, aren't you?
Very matter of fact,
because you had got yourself, you'd sorted it out in your own head. You knew that was the option that you were going to go with because it was the best case scenario. So you had made that decision, but then and so it was a matter of fact in your head. And that's what you've continued to be, haven't you? And I'm sure with with lots of internal work going on. But in that run up to the 18th of December, are you supported? Is that because I am making an assumption that there is some kind of counselling service or people who are going to talk to you about how you're going to feel, not only physically, how you're going to cope physically to learn how to be mobile again and how to what's going to happen in terms of a prosthetic, how they're going to do that, and all of the practical physical stuff. How were you supported with the getting your head around this stuff?
I never really thought about it in the lead up. I didn't have any counselling beforehand, and I think that it was partially because you had the complication of the fact I had my surgery down in Plymouth, but all my aftercare was done up here,
right?
Which again is another one of those. It's very fortuitous because the centres up here are really good, like really, really good. So I used to go to the one in Manchester, but now I actually go to the one in Preston. And I think it was just one of those things that because my situation was very specific, I know they do offer counselling, but it is, I guess, one of those things where it's not something you often have a lot of time to prepare for. It's either you've had an accident or you're sick and that's why they're having to do it and that kind of thing. So that period of time between the August and the December was very, very weird. And I'll be honest with you, I don't remember a huge amount of it. So I don't know if that's just my brain like protecting myself. Like it's just it was this weird in-betweeny bit that I don't remember a huge amount about. But what I do know is that having been through therapy since, that I spent a lot of that time trying to protect other people.
Okay.
Because I think I very much just wanted people to be okay with it because I was okay with it and I knew this was the only option. Well, I was as okay with it as I could be. I think you still kind of go through that level of grief of my life is never going to be the same. It's going to be better than it is, but it's still not going to be, standard or whatever.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time trying to make other people feel better about it.
Right.
And I think that in the end, that ended up being a little detrimental to my mental health, because I got to the point where I felt like I couldn't be sad about it, or I couldn't have any kind of negative thoughts about the situation or speak negatively. Because the worst thing for me would be someone asking me if I regretted it because I expressed anything other than, oh, this is fine.
Yeah.
Which is interesting and has definitely come out in, like, I know I've got a bit of a strange sense of humor, and that's because it's a trauma response, isn't it? Like you that's how you do it. It was really interesting to me because I'm aware of that, but my therapist, during one of our first sessions, he said to me, he was like, Vic, are you aware you'll say something really sad or really kind of important and then immediately laugh afterwards? And I was like, I actually am aware I do that, but having someone else point it out was really interesting to me. And now I'm hyper aware of the fact I do it.
Yeah.
And I think that'll stem from that period of time when I was trying to make everyone else feel super comfortable with the idea of it.
Yeah.
And, I'm glad I did it, because I think I just couldn't afford to have other people's emotions about it as well as my own. So it was easier to have everyone else be really happy about it. And, like, don't get me wrong, it was a good period of my life, but it was also very strange. Like, you're gonna walk into that room and then not have a leg when you wake up. Like, that's really, really strange. But one of the things I did do in the lead up to the amputation was we had a party at my parents' house, which we called Let's Get Vicky Legless. And it was, honestly, my friend made a leg cake, like genuinely looked like a leg. We played Pin the Leg on Vicky, and we had a photo of me that my friend photoshopped where my leg was missing, and then you had like prosthetic legs which you'd have to like pin on it, and everyone had like loads of fun, and it was good, and it was because it was a way for me to see everyone before I had the surgery, because it was around Christmas. Obviously only a week before Christmas that I had my leg amputated.
Absolutely.
So that was fun. And you know what, that was something I never regret. The amputation party was absurd, and I'm very, very aware of that, but it was a really good night, and I think like really kind of solidified my relationship with the situation. I think. So yeah, I think it really like solidified my relationship with it all. And I don't, I think that was good, and that was and it was really fun in a really strange way.
I've never heard anything like that before, and I just think that you have your response to dealing with what you have dealt with, and actually what you continue to deal with on a day-to-day basis has been to use humor. And I think a lot of us would. I'd like to think that I would. I think I frequently have those moments where it's like, if you don't laugh, then you're going to cry. So actually, let's just laugh. Let's just kind of try and lighten the situation. But that whole idea of a party, Let's Get Vicky Legless, is just kind of definitely reflects how I see you in terms of the way that you use your humor. But I also know that you have massively helped people in terms of how you have dealt with your mental health. And as we've said, you got the British Empire Medal awarded to you earlier this year. So huge congratulations for that. And so well deserved. So well deserved. So it really does feel like you've taken a really crappy situation, actually, and you've made the best of it. So this feels like there's a theme running through your life, kind of in terms of what you've shared with us on this conversation, knowing that you couldn't do what you'd originally planned to do for a career. So what am I going to do? And I'm going to go into an 8-week contract, but actually you were so right for what you were doing there that they then wanted to keep you, and then they keep you a bit longer, and then they keep you a bit longer, and lo and behold, it's 10 years in January. And so that kind of the role that you do now as customer relations manager, I imagine, and we've talked about this, so I know it to be true, this is a very tricky role. This is a role where you are going to be on the receiving end of people's issues and challenges with the service that they're receiving from TransPennine.
Yeah.
The stuff you've gone through personally, does that help you on a day-to-day basis in terms of how you approach your job and how you are with people?
Yeah, I think so. I think in a couple ways, I think it not only does it make me resilient, like what's happened, and that's something I always used to shy away from calling myself. Like, one thing I'm trying to get better at is acknowledging what my strengths are, because I think I've kind of got into this headspace previously where I felt like it was bragging or being big-headed to kind of, but not that I would ever think that of anyone else. That was something I would very much internalize for some reason. It's very strange what you allow other, your expectations of yourself are versus what your expectations of other people.
Yeah.
And mine is so different. So I'm trying to get better at it. So like, I know I'm a very resilient person. Like I'm a very emotional person, but I don't think that's a wrong thing. And I don't think those two things are opposite either. I think it's totally possible to be someone who's emotional and like cries at stuff all the time, which I do, but also then be able to deal with the situation. Like, I think resilience is key in my job, because it isn't easy. It isn't easy in any way, shape, or form. And I started out as an advisor, so I think it's helpful that I've worked every role like possible. So originally doing data input, then I was an advisor, so I was taking phone calls. The first ever phone call I ever took at that contact center, the customer called me the C word. The first ever call I ever took.
Oh my word. Right, okay.
I'm still here. So,
I'm just still smiling.
Yes. And I think that is one part of it. So I think part of it is the resilience, because it does weigh, and it does wear me down. Like I at the minute, especially the nature of how unending the current situation in the industry does make it hard. And I know it's affecting everyone. Like there's no one I've spoken to, no matter what grade they are, no matter what job they do, who isn't affected by how it currently is. And I think that is, it's something that's there. But I think the other part of it for me is empathy. Like I think that, these customer service, the biggest part of it is empathy. That's and I think empathy comes quite easily to me. And I don't know whether that's because I think it's probably always been there to a degree, but also after everything I went through, I think it really highlights, and especially when you are struggling with your mental health, that you never know what someone else is going through, and you never really know what someone else is thinking. And I think especially in the modern world, with social media and everything the way it is, like I think that people have got a lot better at portraying a version of them on the surface.
Yes.
And then not hiding what's actually going on underneath. And I think I've got cousins who are like 16 and 18. And I'm always very glad that I was not their age now. Like, like I think
me too.
Like I just don't think, I don't know, that must be hard. And I just think, people are much better at like pretending that everything's okay when it isn't, which is what we're trying to get away from.
Yes.
And that's why I'll always be like, I'm not having a good time, because of always the hope of that if I'm honest about it, someone else will be. And it's just, which I think is important. To empathy, I think it's a big thing that because of what's happened to me, it's made me quite good at empathizing with other people when things are happening to them. And I'm not saying you need to go through something like that to have that level of empathy, but it is a key part of my job, 100%.
Yeah.
Because, and also what I try and remember all the time, and it is hard sometimes, I've had customers make me cry.
Yeah.
Like I've had customers like where I've had to go sit in the print room and cry, like after dealing with, endless emails or people being really awful on the phone. I think you have to, when you can, remember that they're not angry at you. They're angry at the situation or the company or whatever. And you're a representative of that, essentially.
Yeah.
But you can always tell, and again, I always joke about this, but I think it's true. You can always tell when someone's worked in customer service, when someone hasn't, or retail, or anything where there's a customer service aspect to their role. You can always tell when someone's done it and when someone hasn't.
Yeah, you absolutely can. It's interesting, just over the over summer actually. So my daughter went away to uni last September, and she is working in a bar in one of the hotels, and she loves it. She really, really enjoys it. But I've noticed what a big thing for me when we've been out then into a restaurant or a bar. how she is with the people that are serving us is so completely different. And I'm generally I am a lovely person, so I will always engage positively with whoever I'm kind of interact with. But Neve is doing that in a completely different way because she knows what it's like to be them. So especially when things are not going right, because that's a dreadful situation to be dealing with, and obviously in the rail industry at the moment, we know that there are so many different challenges and situations that the frontline teams and the customer relations teams are having to deal with, which I would imagine is just kind of magnified even to what you might have had in the summer timetable issues that have gone on over the last few years, which I think kind of takes us nicely, Vicky. I could talk to you for hours about this stuff because I find that I just think you've got an amazing way of communicating. I think that you are you're so down to earth and so practical, but you're so wise. Do you know some of the things that you're sharing with us? There's just such a lot of wisdom in there about how you're dealing with your lot, how you're not letting it define you, but in a lot of ways it does define you because you are using it to be the absolute best version of yourself that you can be. To kind of take it into a work context for this next part then, which kind of leads on from what we were just discussing. If you were to rule the world, Vicky, if you were kind of right at the top leadership position of the UK rail industry, and I was to say to you, right, Vicky, I can give you 3 wishes for what you want to change, what would those changes be? What would you like to see happen to make the industry fit for the future?
I was thinking about this, and it's more, I think, the biggest thing is understanding. I think that when I've been out and about and spoken to people about my job and spoken to them about theirs, you realize there's so much about each other's roles you just don't know. Like, there's so much about each other's jobs that you just don't understand. And one thing I've always kind of thought, and this is within my current role, is I think if things were as easy to do as everyone thought they were, we'd be doing them already. Like, but you can apply that to everything. Like, that's not just work or the railway. Like, if something was as easy as you think it is, there's a really good chance whoever you're thinking should be doing it would be doing it already. So there's always a reason why something isn't happening. So I think, better understanding of each other's jobs would be something, because I think that there's always this kind of assumption that everyone knows what you know, and I don't, and that isn't true in any way, shape, or form. So I would say that would be my key one, is a better understanding of each other's jobs and each other's roles. And there's never any kind of, and I think something we run into, for an example of that, for example, is within customer service, and then also the social media team. I think that, one of the things we have to deal with is complaints about members of staff. Like, it's something that happens. People are always going to complain about staff members. And it's, whether it's justified or not justified isn't the point I'm trying to make. The point is it kind of creates this situation where there's this us versus them aspect of it, where they think that we believe everything we're told, but we're sort of in this situation where we have to do something with it. Like, if customers contacted us and said something, we have to say, thank you for letting us know.
Of course.
We will pass this on. So whenever I do speak to frontline staff, and Rich Holiday, who's our learning and development manager, whenever he introduces people, he'll say, part of Vic's job is to do this, but it's because she has to. It's not because she enjoys getting people into trouble or doing it's sending this stuff off to managers. Like, that's not the point. The point is we have to do that. But I think that unless you have that context of the situation, you are potentially going to sit there and think, oh, the social media team and the customer relations team love to, take everything the customers say and surface value. And like, that's not the case. But, ultimately we're a customer service function. So we can't tell the customer we think they're lying. Like, that's not how it works, So it's kind of, I think that's the best example I have of that, is understanding each other's roles. But also I know that if I had a different job, and I've had it before where customers have been rude about me publicly, it's hard and it's not very nice, and you do worry people are going to take it for face value. So I can see both sides of that. So yeah, I think understanding each other better. We need to listen to each other. I think everyone just needs to listen to each other.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
not quite at the level you do in school where you'd have like everyone, the only person who had the stick was allowed to talk.
Yes.
But I think I
Yeah.
think I think it's just it, it's hard, and I think everyone is feeling it. And I think that listening to each other would be another one. And I think on the opposite side of that, talking, like I think that if I think I've already said we're all feeling it at the minute. It is not
Yeah.
an easy time.
Yeah.
And I won't lie. I always say like, oh, not an easy time to be the customer relations manager. But I don't think it's ever been an easy time to be the
It's not
customer
an easy
relations
job.
manager
No.
in the whole time I've done it, because
No.
we had the December 19 timetable change. COVID, not only did, by the way, was COVID an issue, we moved contact centers during that time. So we were mobilizing a brand new contract in the brand new contact center whilst we were working from home.
Yeah.
So it's like, and like it's never been easy. But I think that we all need to talk a little bit more about the fact that it isn't easy. Like, and like and that acknowledgement won't necessarily fix what's going on, but it humanizes everyone, and it makes it, every single person involved in this is struggling. Like it's, and I think that is something that can't be brushed over. So I think that would be something that I would do, is like not make people, but be kind of open and honest, and like, I'm struggling.
Absolutely.
And I think,
yeah.
and my opinion of that actually has always been that if you have people at the top saying that, it trickles down.
Yeah.
So like, and I think that, there shouldn't be, but there is still this kind of, if I say something at work, they're going to think I'm not up to the job, or they're not up, whatever. Yeah. And that's just not true. And if that shouldn't be the case in any way, shape or form. But I think if you have senior leaders and management and people like that saying, you know what, this is hard on me.
Yeah.
That makes you feel better, and it'll make people who work for you feel better, and it kind of all trickles down, doesn't it? So I think that, and it needs to be genuine.
Yeah.
But I think that's very much like my view on all of
that. You said a few minutes ago about when you have been, because you have been prepared to talk about the stuff that you've gone through, and that your mental health challenges, how you have dealt with them and continue to deal with them, but actually you have been really honest about how you feel. And I think I've certainly, it'll be 10 years in January since I came into the rail industry too. So it's our anniversary. It's our 10th anniversary in January of Intuitive being launched, which is really exciting and amazing. Some of the changes that I've seen, even in the last, I would say probably the last 2 to 3 years, but Rail Wellbeing Live for a start, very, very senior people appearing, so taking part in it in the first instance, but then being prepared to talk about it. I think it was Mick Lynch or Mick Cash, I can't remember which one. One of them kind of really kind of came on and shared his own kind of feelings, what he was going through. Some really senior people in the industry have been prepared to do that. So I think there is more of that happening, but we need to kind of make sure that everybody feels safe to do that. And you know what, for me personally, last week it was National Menopause Day, last Tuesday, and I was I'm going to put a post out on LinkedIn about this, and I couldn't on Tuesday. I kept typing it. I go, oh no, I'm not doing it, and then on Wednesday someone else shared something, and it was kind of, do you know what, I'm going to share their article because it was brilliant, and I'm just going to share some of my own stuff alongside that. It felt really, it felt scary, Vicky. It felt like, my God, I'm showing some vulnerability here, and I'm doing it in front of however many people choose to read that LinkedIn post. But the more people who are prepared to show the vulnerability and to be honest, then we're giving permission for other people to do the same, aren't we? Which I think can only be for the greater good of the industry, but actually more importantly, the individuals within it.
Exactly. And I think for me, like, one of my main drivers for always being so open about how I'm doing and I'm feeling is, I did several years ago now, around the time I lost my leg, I think it was just before, I lost a friend to suicide. And that was a really kind of polarizing moment in my life for me, because we had no idea that he wasn't doing okay. Like, it was really shocking. And I think for me, in my head, something clicked and was like, I never want to not know how someone I love or care about is doing again. Like, I don't want that, this is a horrible feeling. Like, wouldn't wish it on anyone. And I think for me, that kind of just clicked in my head where I was like, well, if I'm expecting other people to be honest with me, I need to be honest with other people. It's a two-way street. And so I'll always be honest. Like, I've had a really tough time lately. It's a rough time of year in general. Like, not, as my gran would say, the nights are drawing in. And it's it's rough time of year in general. Work is hard at the minute. And it's just it's hard, and I'm not against saying that I've been struggling lately. Like, but you just talk to people that you can trust about it, and that's always helpful.
So we'll bring the conversation to a close. I literally could talk to you for hours, and we're going to kind of leave it on a very positive note, because I like to hear if people have got a favorite quote that they use, if there's something that you go back to time and time again, if there's something that kind of inspires you, but also if there are individuals that inspire you as well. It's kind of what makes you feel better.
I mean, I think the people who inspire me the most, there's two actually that I'm going to mention, like, who've inspired me, like, personally and in my career wise. One is Catherine O'Brien, who I know you're very good friends with. She's just, I told her on more than one occasion when I've had maybe a glass of wine too much on the way out that I want to be her when I grow up.
Me too, like, Vicky. Me too. Definitely.
And I just and she's always been very supportive of me on a personal level as well as a career level. Like, I think, especially because, I don't have any family up here or anything like that. Like, she's we've always kind of joked she's my work mum. And I think that, that's a relationship that I really kind of treasure, professionally as well as personally. And I think actually it's something that, if I were to eventually leave TPE, that would be one of the things that would be hardest for me. I know it wouldn't end the relationship, but it'd be really kind of, I love working for her. So it's like, that would
absolutely
be, I love working for her. And the other is, as cheesy as might sound, my mum, because she's always been the breadwinner in the family for us, because my dad's disabled, and as long as I've got memory of it, has not been able to work as a result of that. So my mum has really worked her way up. So she, when I was really young, worked in Tesco, and then she started working into schools. And while she was working full time, technically my dad's carer essentially as well, raising two daughters. She also got a master's degree in business management.
Wow.
So she did her undergrad and then her master's.
So
then she was a school business manager for years, and now she actually is a GP practice manager, and started that job in early 2020. So
what a time.
I know, had a real easy first couple of years working for the NHS.
Oh my God.
I just think, like, my mum's just always, she's always been there, but she's always kind of just like her ability to just kind of get on with it work-wise, I think, is kind of where I've kind of understood it. I think I just grew up thinking that was normal. So I think that was kind of just the standard, I guess. So she's very funny though, my mum. Me and my sister always make fun of her because she's so switched. And my sister actually works for her. She works at the same GP.
Oh, right.
So she sees my mum in work mode, which I've never experienced. I love my mum. We couldn't work together. She's admitted it too. Like, we would not. It would not go well. But they work together, and the difference between my mum in work and my mum out of work is so funny. It's like it's two completely different people. And it's so, because she's so organized and so pulled together at work and everything like that, and then she'll ask like the stupidest questions outside of work and just say like the funniest things, and we always joke, it's like she puts all of her concentration into like work mode. And it's the disparity between the two versions of her is one of my favorite things. It's so funny because
I can relate to that, Vicky. I can definitely relate to that. I think my family would as well. It's like, how the hell is she running a business when she can't even kind of work out where where the butter is? It's just it's bizarre. So leave us with a quote, Vicky. Give us some words of wisdom. You've given us loads of words of wisdom of your own, but share a quote with us to finish off this conversation.
So the quote that I think about the most is it says, if someone thinks you're too much, tell them to go look for less. And I think that one thing I've always felt about myself, or like one of my most self-critical thoughts, has always been I'm a lot to deal with. Because I'm not quiet. I'm not. I'll say what I think.
Yeah.
I do use my sense of humor as a defense mechanism. So I do try, and I am, especially in a new social setting where I'm potentially nervous or anxious, I'm very much the class clown. So I know that I'm what I would have historically called a lot or too much, and actually that's not a bad thing. Like if I'm too much for someone, that's their problem, not mine. And that's something that I'm very much trying to think about and get used to. So yeah, I would say that would be it.
I love that. I absolutely love it. I've never heard it before. I am going to share it with my daughter because I know it will really resonate with her. It also makes me think, gosh, this is interesting, because another thing that I think a lot of certainly a lot of women struggle with, that I'm aware of, is this feeling that I'm not enough. So I'm not good enough. I've not done enough. And just generally I'm not enough. So how can we be too much and not enough at the same time? I know. But I love.
But it's true, isn't it? Like it's such a thing, and I think women in particular have a real issue. There's a real issue with us being multifaceted sometimes. Like I think we're people try and fit us into boxes and everything like that. And I just think it's you can feel both things, but I think that, and we can be accused of being too much, and it's just kind of. But it's not, if I'm loud, then I'm loud. That's just who I am as a person, know.
I just love that. I love that. And I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I knew I would, because, whenever, whether I see you on social media or whether I see you in real life, it's kind of you bring in something, you're sharing your own experiences, you're supporting other people, you're being very vulnerable in your own right in terms of sharing your journey, and on behalf of everyone who listens to this and gets inspiration from it, thank you. Massive thank you from me for agreeing to take part. I'm over the moon that you have done. And massive thanks. So Vicky Snell, British Empire Medal holder, thank you so much for being part of the Intuitive Insights podcast today.
Thank you.
My huge thanks to Vicky for being so honest, for being so vulnerable, and for sharing so many words of wisdom during that conversation. I really hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did.